Hello and welcome back to Belle's Books. I'm Carly and today I'm going to be taking you through all the books I read in September and October, which isn't that much actually because I've been reading quite a few big beefy books and they've been taking me a while, as well as having lots of PhD stuff to do. So Dan is shutting the door very quietly. Thanks. So in September I actually only finished two books. The first one was Salt Slow by Julia Armfield, which is a collection of short stories. I don't have it to hold it up because it was a library book, so I've taken it back. But it was on my radar because I'd heard lots of good things about it on BookTube and I was not disappointed. It was most excellent. It was a collection of short stories, mostly about girlhood and women's embodiment in all of its gross mutability. So there was kind of lots of coming of age stories, but they all had an uncanny bent. So there was always something strange and a bit kind of modern fairy tale eeriness to it. So I really loved them. And they were all like a little bit creepy, a little bit weird, some of them funny. And my favourite one was called Stop Your Women's Ears with Wax, about a strange girl band on tour which had kind of a Beatles-esque following of all these girls that were just like crazy in love with this band, but mysterious things would happen in the towns that they would visit when they were on tour, like men would die. And there was something odd about this band, and it was just kind of creepy, and you're like, what's going on? But amazing, and at the end you're like, so good. So I gave that 5 stars. Excellent, would highly recommend. Then staying with a gothic feel, I then read, I do have this one, The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, which was recommended to me by my lovely friend Holly ages ago. She was like, you need to read this, it's right up your street. So I looked out for it in charity shops and managed to pick up a second-hand copy. It's a big boy, so it took me a while, but it's super engaging. It kept me gripped. It was a real page-turner. It is about a writer, Margaret Lee, who lives in her dad's bookshop and is asked to be the official biographer of famous celebrated author Vida Winter, who has lived a mysterious life and everyone wants to know what's happened to her in her life. And she's been giving them all sorts of stories and not telling them the truth. But now she wants to tell the truth to Margaret. So Margaret goes to her house and listens to her tell her life story, which is to do with this strange old house, a very odd family and their descent into like depravity, slightly questionable parenting, and a creepy set of twins that are just messed up. And there's a big fire at the end. So amazing. All kinds of kind of gothic, creepy vibes, a bit Daphne du Maurier, a bit Jane Eyre. And kind of references to literature are all throughout this novel. So it's a real kind of book lover's book. I loved it. There's a really good twist at the end, and it's just super good, creepy for this time of year. So I would highly recommend it for autumn winter. Love that. Now really keen to get to more Diane Setterfield. I've actually got To the River out of the library, but I haven't started reading it yet. So if you have read that, tell me what you think about it in the comments below, because I do kind of want to get to that very soon. So yes, another 5-star book for September. So they're the 2 books I finished in September. Then in October, I read The Good Immigrant, which I don't have because it was a library copy and I've taken it back. But I do want to get myself a copy of this because it's one of those books that I feel like I want to return to. I really loved it. It's a collection of essays by various different people reflecting on the experience of being an immigrant in Britain today. And some of them touch on like first generation experiences, so from their parents or grandparents. And there's lots of different themes in this collection. So I found it fascinating because there were things that I hadn't come across before, or that I wasn't too familiar with, like oh, what is it called? So there's one essay called Perpetuating Casteism by Sarah Jarhim. I think that's her name. Sorry if I got that wrong. Which is about the caste kind of system in India, the way that the class system is left over from colonial times. So people are kind of in these certain groups, and the Dalits, I think, are the lowest, and they're just treated abominably. So people try and hide their kind of like where they're from if they're from the Dalit community, and the colour of their skin is all like tied up with privilege. So if you're lighter skin, then you're more privileged, and it's kind of heartbreaking the way that British Empire and colonial times has infected other societies and left this horrid trace behind that is still being perpetuated, and not just in India, but in the places where people have emigrated to, so here as well. There was some funny essays, like Nish Kumar wrote a really funny one on being a confused Muslim, and the just ridiculous kind of internet trolling you get about that's anti-Muslim. And the one that I was really surprised about was by Himesh Patel, who the name I didn't recognise, but he's actually an ex-EastEnders actor. I don't know if he's still in it or not. But he mentioned my hometown, and I was really surprised about that, because he said that his parents came here, and when they came to live in St Neots, they were kind of accepted into the community and didn't receive any kind of racist abuse, and they were very, treated very nice, which I can't see happening today, because St Neots is a place that's very conservative and full of gammon and a lot of narrow-minded people. I'm slagging off my hometown, but I'm allowed to because I live here. So yeah, that was a strange thing to come across. There were some really beautifully written essays, and one of my favourite ones was Shade by Selena Godden, who I'd heard of, but I want to get to more of her work, which was kind of a reflection on the shade that is thrown at people of colour, as well as the shade of skin tones. That was beautifully written. And the one by Rennie Edo-Lodge, who I have got her book, I'm no longer talking to white people about race, and I haven't read that yet, but I do want to get to it. So I just found it a really great book, and it's one of those ones that I think everybody should read, and it should just, especially people of my town. Yeah, I just think it's so important to appreciate other people's experiences, from when you're talking, like, as a white person of privilege, you don't appreciate everything that other people have been through, that are coming to a different country and that get racial abuse, and it's just all that heartbreaking stuff people have to know about that don't encounter it. So yeah, I would recommend it to everybody, and feel like I want to buy it for everyone for Christmas. So that was excellent. Then I finished, because I was reading this in September, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. And I really enjoyed this. I was a bit worried because I love Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights so much, so I was like, oh, Anne's got a lot to live up to. But this is totally different, because where Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, I read them as a teenager, and I love them with that kind of teenage mindset of it being, oh, so dramatic. This is totally different, and I think I really appreciate it at the age that I'm reading it now, because it's to do, the main character is Helen Huntingdon. There's a fly in here, sorry. And she is the new tenant of Wildfell Hall, and she has escaped from her alcoholic and abusive husband, and the people of the village that the Wildfell Hall is in are all like, who is this stranger? Why is she here? What's her story? And they're all really nosy and want to find out what's going on. The first part of the narrative is told by Gilbert Markham, who is a resident of the village, and I didn't like him at all. I really didn't like his narrative because he's got such a big head, as most men in this book do. They were like full of self-importance and their own ego, and he falls in love with Helen, and I just couldn't stand him. But I really loved the part of the narrative which is Helen's voice, and that's written as like diary entry. So it's her diary from before she gets married, and it shows the kind of the manipulation and the abuse that goes on from very early on as a gradual process to just like the way she was treated utterly abominably by her husband, and then her eventual escape to Wildfell Hall. So yeah, I really love this book, and also because it deals with real issues, not like you know, a mad wife locked up in the attic is potentially not a real issue, or you know, things that Jane Eyre went through with her that Cathy and Heathcliff went through with their strange incestuous relationship. This is kind of an expose of real life and the real shit that women had to put up with in relationships, for the sake of you know, they had to preserve what their marriages looked like, and they had to stay married even though their husbands were utter horrors, for want of a better word. So yeah, I really love this book, and I thought it was really strong, and I don't know why it's kind of, Anne Bronte has got this reputation as being the lesser Bronte sister, because I think this book holds up and is actually as strong as, if not stronger than, the other two novels. Anyway, so yes, 5 stars for The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. Then what did I read? Oh yeah, then I read the Victorian Chaise-longe, which is a Persephone book by, I'm going to get this name right, Margarita Lasky. I think I've said that right. Which is a little novella, and it's just super unnerving. So it's about this woman that's just had a baby. I think in the 1950s it's supposed to be set originally. So she has this baby, but she's also suffering from tuberculosis. So she is kind of very mollycoddled by her husband and doctor, who tell her that she has to get better and she has to do what they say, and she can't see her child, and she has to rest, and she can't have fresh air and all that. So she gets kind of tucked up and put to bed on this chaise-longe that she has bought from an antique shop. She goes to sleep, and then she wakes up in the body of someone else in the Victorian times. So first of all, I was like, oh, hang on, she's delusional. Is she dreaming? But then the narrative stays in the Victorian time frame for the rest of the novel, and it's super like unnerving, because you don't know whether it's like, is it ambiguous that, is she dreaming? Is this all just like her being delusional? Or is it that she's actually travelled back in time and is stuck in the body of a woman who is suffering the same kind of thing as her, and nothing's really changed? So it's kind of a commentary on the way that women are treated, and the way that they're expected to conform to male instructions when it's regarding their own bodies and their own children. So fascinating look at like postpartum experience, and just super creepy. But yeah, it's only little. Give it a read. I'd really recommend it. I really love Persephone books. I want to get to more of them. I've got that collection of short stories that I picked up earlier in the year, so I want to get to that, because I think some of those were quite creepy. So yes, would definitely recommend the Victorian Chaise-longe. Then I listened to on audio the second book of the Pages & Co. books by Anna James. So it was Tilly and The Lost Fairy Tales. I think the first one was called Tilly and the Book Wanderers, and it's just like, after all that creepy stuff, that was a bit intense. It was just a lovely book to listen to. I really love listening to those kind of books on audio. I listen to them in the car, and yeah, it's just lovely. It's set at Christmas, so I would highly recommend it for Christmas time. It's super cozy. In this sequel, Tilly and her friend Oscar go to Paris to visit his dad, and they get stuck inside a book of fairy tales which is changing, kind of reflecting on the nature of fairy tales that changes with every retelling and different versions. But in this book, weird things are happening to the fairy tales, and characters are ending up in places they're not supposed to be, and storylines are morphing. And it's set against the backdrop of the British Underlibrary being commandeered by a nasty librarian who's trying to like restrict book wandering and impose all these regulations and rules on what people can and can't do. So yeah, it's just really loved kind of that dual kind of narrative of what was going on in the wider scheme of book wandering, as well as what was happening to Tilly and Oscar. Also, I really appreciate the food and drink in these books. Like, I love hearing about, I think this is kind of harking back to my Enid Blyton reading days. I love hearing about what people are drinking and eating. There's lots of hot chocolate with marshmallows and a nice jacket potato and some all lovely rich smelling foods. Bloody love hearing about that. So yes, super cozy for this time of year, especially now it's dark outside and a bit gloomy. So if you've overdosed on gothic scariness, have some Tilly and the Book Wanderers, because it's just lovely. So that is my wrap up for September and October. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, only 6 books. But like I say, I was reading a few beefy books, and I have finished one in November that I was reading throughout September and October as well. So I will talk to you about the books I have read for November, non-fiction November, which is going very well for me. So I will tell you about that at the end of the month. But in the meantime, if you've read any of these books that I've talked about, if you would like to read any of them, or if you've got any recommendations off the back of these, hit me up in the comments below. Talk to me, tell me what's going on, what you're reading at the moment, and any recommendations for winter. I mean, I don't need any because I've got loads of books that I want to pick up in winter time. But, you know, I'm always open to suggestions. So I hope you're having a lovely non-fiction November. And I will see you at the end of the month for my wrap-up, which I will not delay this time. I'm trying to keep on top of it. Now then. Excellent. Speak to you all very soon.